Welcome to Hollywood latest reports on a Sunday morning at Family Worship Center, where the Swaggart family has preached for decades. Something extraordinary happened. Gabriel Swaggart, the grandson of the legendary televangelist Jimmy Swaggart, stood at the pulpit not with the confidence people are accustomed to, but with tears streaming down his face. What began as another sermon turned into a deeply personal moment, one that shocked the congregation and viewers around the world. For the first time in years, Gabriel laid bare his soul and shared a part of his own story that he had long kept hidden. The Swaggart family is known for preaching powerful sermons, fiery gospel messages, and strong doctrinal stances. But in this particular moment, Gabriel did something different. He let go of the preacher's shield and allowed the world to see the man behind the microphone. His tears were not theatrical or forced. They were raw, emotional, and uncontainable. The pulpit, which had always been a platform of strength, became a place of confession, healing, and vulnerability. As he began to recount his personal struggles, doubts, and the burdens of being part of a family that has lived under constant public scrutiny, the congregation fell silent. People leaned forward, captivated not by eloquent words, but by the broken voice of a man who admitted he did not always have it all together. In that silence, something powerful happened. Gabriel's story connected with thousands who had felt the same pain, fear, and weight of expectations. The burden of the Swaggart name. To understand why Gabriel's tears struck such a chord, one must look at the weight of the Swaggart legacy. Jimmy Swaggart, Gabriel's grandfather, was once among the most famous evangelists in the world. His televised crusades in the 1980s reached millions, and his fiery preaching style made him a household name. Yet the Swaggart ministry was also plagued by controversies and scandals that cast a long shadow over the family. Growing up in such an environment was never easy. Gabriel, unlike ordinary children, could not walk into a grocery store or attend a school event without someone recognizing his last name. Expectations followed him everywhere, expectations to be perfect, holy, and flawless. Every mistake seemed magnified, every weakness judged. While other teenagers could stumble in private, Gabriel's missteps would always carry the burden of his family's legacy. Standing at the pulpit, Gabriel admitted that at times, the pressure was suffocating. He confessed that he had often wondered whether he was strong enough to carry the Swaggart name, whether he could truly serve God without being crushed by the weight of comparison. His tears told the story of a man who had spent much of his life wrestling with identity, not just as a preacher, but as a son, a husband, a father, and a man trying to walk with God. A message from the heart. As Gabriel wept, he reminded the congregation that pastors, too, are human. Behind the suit and the sermon, they struggle with fear, temptation, and doubt. For years, Gabriel had felt the need to present himself as strong, unshakable, and always in control. But in that moment, he confessed he was not always those things. "I want you to know," Gabriel said with his voice trembling, "that I am no different than you. I've walked through nights of fear. I've faced battles no one could see, and I've carried questions in my heart that I couldn't always answer. But I also know this: God has never left me, and His grace has carried me through every single moment." Those words cut deep into the hearts of the listeners. Many in the audience began to cry with him. Some raised their hands in worship, while others bowed their heads, silently thanking God for the honesty they had just witnessed. For years, people had admired Gabriel's preaching, but now they saw the man behind the pulpit, a man who struggled, wept, and leaned on God just as they did. The untold struggles of ministry. The world often sees the glamour of ministry, the lights, the cameras, the sermons broadcast to millions. But what people rarely see is the loneliness of ministry. Gabriel opened up about nights where he lay awake, wondering if he was truly making a difference. He spoke of seasons where discouragement seemed overwhelming, when critics attacked his every word, and when the burden of responsibility seemed far too heavy. "I know what it's like," he said with tears flowing, "to feel like you're not enough. To feel like no matter what you do, someone will always find fault. I've questioned whether I belong here. I've asked God, why me? More times than I can count." These words resonated with countless pastors, ministers, and everyday Christians who often feel the same but rarely admit it. Gabriel's openness gave voice to what many had silently carried for years: family support in his lowest moments. Through the tears, Gabriel also credited his family for being his strength. He spoke tenderly about his wife, Jill, who had stood by him through his darkest days. He recalled moments when she reminded him of his calling, encouraging him not to give up even when he felt like walking away. He also spoke of his children, who unknowingly gave him reasons to keep pressing forward. And then there was his grandfather, Jimmy Swaggart. Gabriel admitted that while the world often judged the family harshly, his grandfather's faith and resilience had taught him valuable lessons. "I've watched my grandfather fall, and I've watched him rise again," Gabriel said through his tears. "I've seen him keep preaching when the whole world mocked him, and I've learned from that. When God calls you, no storm can silence you." A congregation transformed. The Family Worship Center is no stranger to powerful moments, but that Sunday was different. The tears of Gabriel Swaggart transformed the atmosphere. Instead of a polished sermon, the congregation received a heartfelt confession that turned into a collective healing. People who had been sitting in silence suddenly began to weep, pray, and embrace one another. The service did not end in the usual way. There was no rush to dismiss the congregation. Instead, the altar filled with people, young and old, men and women, all seeking the same thing Gabriel had found, the courage to be vulnerable before God. That morning was not just about Gabriel's story. It became the story of everyone in the room. His honesty unlocked chains of fear and shame for many who had been hiding their struggles. The pulpit became not a place of performance, but a place of truth. Gabriel Swaggart's tears at the pulpit were not just about his own pain, they represented the pressure of generations. From the moment he was born, he was not only Gabriel, he was a Swaggart. That surname carried both fame and scandal, victory and shame, blessing and burden. The Swaggart family's story is woven deeply into American evangelical history. Jimmy Swaggart, Gabriel's grandfather, built one of the largest ministries of the 20th century. His music, preaching, and crusades drew millions worldwide. But when scandal struck, the name Swaggart became a lightning rod for criticism, ridicule, and constant media scrutiny. For Gabriel, growing up in that atmosphere meant that every choice he made was viewed through the lens of his family's legacy. As a teenager, he wrestled with questions most young people ask: who am I? What is my purpose? But he asked them with the whole world watching. Mistakes were magnified, failures were amplified, and even successes were often dismissed as just because of the family name. At the pulpit that Sunday, Gabriel admitted that for years, he tried to live up to everyone's expectations instead of God's. "I thought I had to be perfect," he said with his voice breaking. "I thought I had to prove myself to people. But I was wrong. God never asked me to be perfect. He asked me to be faithful." The breaking point. Every man has a breaking point. For Gabriel, it came during a season when he felt both spiritually and emotionally drained. The demands of ministry were unrelenting. Preaching multiple times a week, traveling for crusades, hosting Generation of the Cross and other television programs, and leading the youth ministry left him exhausted. On top of that, social media amplified every word he spoke, often twisting his intentions and inviting waves of criticism. One night, Gabriel confessed, he sat in his office long after everyone else had left. With his Bible open in front of him, he cried out to God in frustration. "Lord, I can't do this anymore," he prayed. "I'm not my grandfather. I don't have his strength, his voice, his courage. Why did you put me here?" The silence of that night was crushing. But Gabriel said that in the stillness, he felt God whisper to his spirit, "You don't need to be your grandfather. I called you to be you." That moment became a turning point. It did not erase the challenges, but it gave Gabriel the courage to embrace his own calling instead of living in the shadow of someone else's. Weeping before the world. When Gabriel broke down at the pulpit, it was not a rehearsed act. The tears came unplanned, flowing out of years of bottled-up pain. He shared the struggles of fatherhood, how raising children in the public eye brought its own fears. He spoke about sleepless nights when he worried if he was leading his family well, and he admitted to seasons of doubt, where he questioned whether his prayers were even being heard. Yet, as he spoke, his tears became more than sadness. They became symbols of healing. He reminded the congregation that even Jesus wept. If the Son of God himself could shed tears, Gabriel said, then who are we to think we must always be strong? The sight of a pastor weeping openly was jarring to many. In church culture, leaders are often expected to be unshakable pillars of faith. But Gabriel shattered that expectation, showing that true strength is not the absence of tears, but the courage to cry in front of others. Congregation reactions, tears that spread. As Gabriel wept, the congregation followed. People who had never shed a tear in public found themselves sobbing. Hardened men broke down. Women lifted their hands, whispering prayers of gratitude. Children clung to their parents as the sanctuary filled with a holy silence, interrupted only by the sound of weeping. For many, it was the first time they had seen vulnerability in the pulpit, and that vulnerability gave them permission to face their own hidden struggles. One man later testified that Gabriel's tears helped him finally confront years of hidden addiction. A young woman shared that she had felt unworthy of God's love until she saw a pastor admit he struggled too. The service became more than a sermon. It was a collective experience of healing. Gabriel Swaggart, a silent anchor. During his message, Gabriel spoke about his wife, Jill. He described her as his silent anchor, the one who steadied him when the storms of ministry threatened to overwhelm him. He recalled nights when he wanted to give up, but Jill reminded him of his calling. She would look at me, Gabriel said through his tears, and tell me, "You're not doing this alone. God called us both, and as long as I'm here, you'll never fight alone." Her unwavering support gave Gabriel strength to continue. While the public often sees only the preacher on stage, they rarely see the sacrifices made by the family behind the scenes. Jill's quiet faithfulness became a central theme of Gabriel's story, a reminder that ministry is never a one-man effort but a partnership. Lessons from his grandfather. Gabriel also reflected on his relationship with his grandfather, Jimmy Swaggart. Despite the controversies that marked Jimmy's ministry, Gabriel spoke with honor and gratitude. He recounted moments when his grandfather encouraged him, not through grand speeches but through example. "I watched him fall," Gabriel said, "but I also watched him get back up. I saw him lose everything, and I saw him preach again when people said he was finished. If there's one thing